Where's Sainties?
St. Elizabeth University.
St. Elizabeth is the best kept secret in New Jersey. Here, turn your passion into your profession. St. E's has one goal: to support intelligent, determined young women and men, becoming the best people they are destined to be.
The power to learn.
The power to grow.
The power to succeed.
We're St. E's.
St. Elizabeth University. The power to soar.
Hi, and welcome to our podcast today. I am Dr. Jill Caruso. I'm director of the master's program in counseling psychology at St. Elizabeth University, and I'm presenting today with
Dr. Chris Lipperini. I am the director of our counseling psychology PsyD program.
So we're excited to be meeting with you today. We want to thank you to all of our alum that are going to be joining us virtually today. And we also, just to let you know, we have a live studio audience that's joining us, for some of our staff and students that were able to attend today. So today we're going to be talking about the emotional impact from cell phone usage. And what does that do for us? You know, we have positives, we have negatives, so we're going to be exploring both of those today. So the first that we're going to be looking at is really thinking about our phones. I mean, they're just with us with every waking moment, you know, but are they lifting us up emotionally, or are they quietly draining us? So really kind of understanding the impact of both and what can we do about it? So I'm going to get started. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the positives because, you know, they are, you know, some great things that come with cell phone usage, you know. So when I'm thinking about it, you know, what did we do before cell phones? So I'll get into that a little bit. But just to kind of talk about this, first is the connectivity. So when I'm talking about this connection, it's connection to loved ones. It's connection to reducing that impact of this loneliness that we can have in our lives. So, you know, having this, we joke around that it's almost like an appendage now with our hands. We're so connected to our phones. So it can be great. You know, I think about some of my older relatives that have these cell phones and they can reach out and they can be with us. And so that's a wonderful thing. So some of those, you know, with my kids, find my iPhone, you know, or if you're the Android users, the Life 360s, right? So, you know, having that connectivity, are my kids crazy about it? No, probably not. But, you know, to have that connection, to know that that safety is there is a beautiful thing. So that connection is a wonderful component. Other than that, we have convenience, we have safety, you know, access to help. I think about it when my car broke down prior to, 2005 when iPhones came out. What did I do? I had AAA, but how did I get in touch with them? I had to find a payphone. Okay, so now I'm dating myself here a little bit. So Mom always made sure I had my quarters on me. But those are things that people don't even know now. Cell phones just don't exist. They're just not out there. So, you know, it's another way of safety, being able to have these cell phones. So that is a great piece of it. GPS, finding my absolute best route and knowing, okay, I'm going to get there in a reasonable amount of time. And it's probably not the route that I thought I was going to start on, and it's taking me in a completely different direction. So there are some of these great pieces. It can also be a comfort to us. So having that, I feel safer. I just have it nearby because I can connect. If need be, I have that ability. So that's a beautiful thing as well. Another area is that mood regulation. So we're going to get into a little bit on the negative side because there could be that negative component as well. But entertainment, games, we all have downtime. We do. And what does that look like? You know, I don't know about everybody else, but I love Sudoku. I can play on that for hours. And you have to be careful with it because we'll get into the negative pieces. But it is a stress relief for me and kind of a mood boost sometimes. So some of those pieces are great. And another piece, of course, the mindfulness and the wellness apps that are out there. relaxation, emotional resilience, things that are with us that we can connect to automatically. So there's some really great parts of it. I don't, want to steal thunder from Aristotle, but I'm going to steal his words.
Go ahead.
So he talked about those two kinds of happiness. So even with our cell phone usage, we have to think about those kind of two levels of happiness. One is that hedonic. And what is that? That is like just needing that pleasure, but it's a little bit empty. We don't really have that ability to kind of continue with it. It's more of a distraction and it's not ongoing versus that eudaimonic happiness. And that's that fulfillment and purpose. So, when we're thinking about our cell phones, if it's leaving us less than satisfied, that's not a healthy component. But if I can achieve that, that is that positive piece. And that's really what I'm striving for, is how do I continue on that route to keep that positivity going? So again, know that if your happiness is disappearing automatically, it wasn't happiness. It was a temporary fix. So we're going to get into a little bit more on the temporary fixes and the negative side with Dr. Lipperini right now.
And the dopamine. The dopamine hits we get. Absolutely. Great points, Jill. I really appreciate even the conversation around access. And before I go into the downsides, or rather the things we need to be careful of, thinking about our marginalized communities, of being able to find others, your people, may not be geographically available, but phones allow us to find our people and stay connected. So not without caveats, right? So I always say to my students, and I think as we're talking about this, it depends. So as I talk about some of the negatives or the downsides, pitfalls, it really depends. So it's not either or. Some great points about positive usage, but thinking about when we really need to check in. Is this helpful, as you said? How is this helping with my happiness? So as a psychologist, I have to talk about mental health. And I'd be remiss not to bring that up. So we have lots of studies telling us different things about loneliness and depression and anxiety with phone use. Something that we really want to think about is, where are we going into the conversation? Where are we already mentally? So for somebody who already has anxiety, including maybe some social anxiety, how many of us have ever been on the receiving end of a long silence after we text? Right? Brutal for somebody with anxiety.
Absolutely.
Or you send something out and you get a K back.
Or it's misconstrued.
Absolutely. So when we don't have the context, the seeing the person, the feelings around it, the minute things that are happening between us now, what happens is a lot of anxiety can ramp up. So really being careful for people that already have anxiety, or what we sometimes refer to as an anxious attachment style. They're going to be, some people are going to be really attuned to when people don't get back to them right away. So there can be really these high expectations that we're always on. And that's just not possible. But again, we're always feeling like a conversation is never finished, right?
Yes.
There's always these loose ends. Something to really talk about too is the blue light. So even just what a phone is giving out to us outside of the communication, the blue light really does affect our circadian rhythms. So our sleep cycle is very much affected. It can be as much as 2 hours off. So 2 hours difficulty falling asleep, and then difficulty waking up. I've experienced it myself. So I did some experiments prior to this podcast. So no, but absolutely, it can affect our circadian rhythms. It can affect our melatonin release. So all of our cycles get kind of impacted. Let's just even
over and beyond
Yeah.
the social, that physiological component is really devastating sometimes. And it is ruining that cycle, as you said.
Yeah.
And how do we get back on track? But continue.
How many of us that have had dry eyes, blurry vision, eye fatigue? So there's a very real eye strain. Even our people who are joining us remotely might be watching this on a small screen on their phone while they're multitasking. We love having you, but if you're on your phone all day, including those texts and the small font, there can absolutely be eye strain to contend with too.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, great points.
Yeah, but also talking about the traps that we get into with our connection with people, with cell phone usage. Again, the expectation that people are always going to be available, the potential to misconstrue conversations. But there's also some really interesting findings about when cell phones are on the table with us while we're having a conversation, while we're in relation with each other. Even when the phone is turned off, it impacts the quality of the interaction. There's always like a piece of us.
That's still connected to it.
Absolutely. Again, it's not finished, so we're wondering what's happening there. There is like a mental load that's still a little bit offset into that, dipping into it, wondering what I'm coming back to. And it's felt by both parties. So if I had my
You're
phone out
not
here,
fully, completely
Yeah.
engaged.
yeah, so we would feel that even in this conversation, like less satisfaction with the quality of our interaction, how present somebody is. So that absolutely shows up in relationships. So even when your phone is off, it's coming into play. So thinking about that piece too, of just how much impact that has, right?
Excellent.
So let's talk about attention and concentration and working memory. I'm a middle-aged woman, so I need to keep all I have. But when it comes to splitting attention, it's really difficult. So our working memory is impacted if we're trying to keep a thread going, keep an app open, and be in conversation with somebody else. Students in the classroom, I've had conversations about phones off, and it is so hard for anybody, including my graduate students, my adult learners, to put the phone away, or for me to put it away while teaching. What am I missing? But it diverts our attention and our ability to really focus on what's happening in the present.
Yeah, I know we're going to get into it in a little bit, but also the alerts that come through.
Yeah.
It is that automatic distraction because it is taking that attention away.
Yeah, and there is there's a psychological principle, the Zeigarnik effect of the unfinished business. And our phone really creates an environment where there's always unfinished business. So really to be aware of that. And when our sleep is impacted and our relationships are impacted, that bleeds into other areas too, including, are we getting enough sleep to be a safe driver? Are we
Right.
seeing on our dashboard, paying up how many messages have come in since we got in the car, and are we trying to respond to them while driving? So again, that split attention has a lot of impact on drivers around us, people we're in a relationship with. So there really is a ripple effect.
Yes, I completely agree. It is. It's interesting. We kind of have some of the stats here as well. I think this kind of blew me away as far as some of the pieces of how our mental health was impacted and that linking to anxiety and depression based on the amount of time. I don't know you, but on Sundays when you get that alert from your phone and it tells you how long you've been on all week, I almost don't want to show my kids.
My
too
kids
long.
don't look so good either. Their usage is troubling, right? But again, my daughter is chatting with a friend while she's playing Roblox. So where does the social end? And when does it become problematic? Like, this is also, we have to recognize it's not going anywhere, right?
Right.
The monitor on psychology, great timing. I just got it in the mail yesterday.
That's great.
Talking about phone use. The average age of your first smartphone,
Scary.
it's 8.5 years old, right? My daughter's 8, so I'm just kind of waiting. I think back, my son was in 5th grade, but again, it's here to stay. So how do we teach responsible use? How do we model that responsible use?
Agreed.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's not going anywhere, including with older adults. Jitterbugs,
Yes.
it's a great way to connect. But again, the reliance, how many times have you had GPS that then drives you into a lake, right? A famous Office episode. But again, the over-reliance sometimes really has consequences for us as well.
Yeah, yeah. I know I'm a stats girl, and I can't help but ever look at the numbers, and some of them were just so high. 66% of users are anxious without their phones. So if they don't have it attached to them, if they don't have that component, they're feeling less than already. We talked a little bit about, just even kind of that confidence. How do we feel without it? With kids getting, not having it, how do we navigate that component? Because socially, it is a huge endeavor to not have it. And what does that look like? And how do we have those kind of conversations? And we're going to get into some of that in a few minutes as to what we can do differently as well in the future. But, to really just this level of awareness too, because like you said, age 8.
And we're talking about dopamine. We're talking about the hit we get when someone responds to us. It feels really good, and it's activating those same pathways that we look at with addiction. I mean, and some people are far more engaged with that and getting those dopamine hits throughout the day, really depending on that. But also just keeping in mind that for young people, remember, I'm going to go back to it depends. So I'm going to give you some, I'm going to concede absolutely that there are strengths too. Like, if we look at straight statistics and we see the amount of use of cell phone is related to loneliness or whatever else, mental health wise. We also know that our young people who are using cell phones, the higher the rate of cell phone usage, they're actually seeing their friends more in person. 2 to 3 times versus lower rates 2 to 3 times per week. So we have to look at the whole picture, and it also depends on how they're using it. Are they using it to stay in touch with friends, communicate, versus it's that social media, which we could have another podcast about. The comparison that comes with it, that's where we're really looking at the detrimental effects to mental health, where we're comparing up and comparing ourselves to other situations, getting looped in these political discussions, really saying things that we would never say face to face to people online. So that's part of the danger.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I loved how you touched on that biopsychosocial piece, because it is the whole picture. Be it social media, be it these various components that we're getting involved in, there's so many aspects of ourselves that we put out there. And how much would we not put out there, if it wasn't for the social media? We'd kind of keep it back a little bit, but I liked your point of kind of, really engaging everyone and saying, well, how is it impacting you? Because it does depend.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's great.
Yeah.
Okay. So, kind of getting into this point of now, how do we reclaim?
Now what?
Right. Now what? Because there is that component of, what do I do differently? How do I make a change now? Because if it is enhancing a well-being through the connection and, safety, support, and if there's this imbalance that's creating stress, and on the negative side, how are we managing both? So
And we can.
yeah.
We
Go ahead.
can. So let's talk about boundaries. We love boundaries. Psychologists, we love boundaries. It's a buzzword, isn't it?
Truly is.
It really is, but here it's really applicable. Thinking about, how do I want to set up intentional use? Do I take my phone with me in the bathroom? Do I take it with me when I'm walking the dog? Do I take it with me in the tub? What are the rules, right? Including simple things like, can we be phone free when we're out to dinner? Can we be phone free? Can we put them away? So again, visibly not reminding us they're there while we're having dinner as a family or breakfast as a family, however you gather. Setting up some kind of simple parameters and being really intentional about it. At night, I'm talking about blue light. So do we
Excellent.
want to set some boundaries? We know if we can put that phone away 2 hours before bedtime, we're going to have better sleep. We're also not going to have our mind kind of circling on those thoughts and kind of like reinforcing those obsessive thoughts or the compulsive checking that can happen throughout the night and also impact sleep. So boundaries about, do I allow it in my bedroom, can be really helpful. Let's also talk about push notifications. I didn't know what they were exactly, but apparently I had them on, and it was really getting in the way. I'd hear like ping, ping, and again, that split attention, it's another reminder, something's happening over there. I want to go see what it is. So minimize those push notifications. Do you need to be notified of every single thing happening in a game or every single text?
Right. Excellent. Just kind of getting back to the sleep part, creating a routine around sleep. What is that sleep hygiene? When working with clients, when talking with students, maybe keeping it in another room.
Yeah.
Just getting it out of my space. Because it is that push notification. Here is that constant reminder. So if I have a sleep hygiene routine that's saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do, we're going to see an improvement in sleep overall.
You might need to start with it outside the bedroom charging. The temptation might be too great. So it needs to, while you're recharging, it needs to be charging in another room.
It's such a difficult thing.
I know.
Sometimes you text me at 10 o'clock at night. I'm like, I want to talk to you.
I had a thought, which means I'm probably going to bed at midnight now.
And you know I'm going to respond right away. And with my students, they know I'm terrible with my boundaries. I wake up at 2, 3 in the morning, and I want to respond right away. How do we make this a healthier outlet for all of us and setting those realistic boundaries? I love that. I think that's fantastic.
Well, what about the thought, too, that we're actually reinforcing that we believe people can do things for themselves and have coping resources if I'm not responding right away and, perceive bailing them out of a situation or swooping in, the belief that people can figure it out sometimes, too, or it can wait until the next morning and they're going to be okay.
Yeah, the whole 24 hours to respond. I love that. And I've set that in place more this year than I think I ever have before. There's a 24-hour turnaround, be it, if we're working with clients out in the field, working with our students, that's a healthy response, 24 hours.
So we got to slow down the pace. I think that's part of it. Like the pace has become too rushed, too immediate, and also the idea of responding rather than reacting. Whether it's on social media, whether it's in a text to somebody, the heat of the moment, encouraging people to not hit send all the time. Jon Stewart had a really great quote in a recent podcast following everything happening in our country and in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's death, talking about we don't need to rage post after every tragedy, right? Of sometimes taking that step back and then thoughtfully posting can benefit us all.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because on the opposite end, as we were talking about some of these kind of positives, out there are these apps. And so there's mindfulness apps. There's wonderful areas that are out there that we can connect to, and it reminds us that we're in control. Here's these grounding exercises that kind of take us back and say, okay, you know what, let me be in the moment, so I could use my phone for that in a sense and shut down everything else and kind of get into that mindfulness. There's Insight Timer, there's Calm, there's Headspace, there's Balance. There's so many different apps that are out there that are very effective. So we can use cell phones for good as well, besides having the healthy boundaries from them, to use them for an effective purpose as well can really be helpful. You had talked about the social media with the comparisons and how do we restructure that? It's really kind of taking some of that negativity and turning it around now and saying, what can I do differently? How do I look at this in a different way? I mean, have you ever read a text and you took it a completely different way than someone had really intended it to be?
So really you run with it and you have a mental image of what's going to happen. You're catastrophizing and they didn't even think anything of it. The K was just K.
But, my kids also school me in that I didn't realize. If I'm putting that in a capital letter and I'm like screaming at people and, okay, there's, an etiquette that goes with it as well.
Yeah.
So it's kind of being mindful of some of that too. So, yeah, I mean, we kind of joke around a little bit about my organization and it might be a little bit over the top.
I appreciate it.
I appreciate you for appreciating that.
I need it.
Does it get to the point of possible clinical diagnosis? Sometimes, maybe. I'm not going to lie. But I also could use my cell phone for some of my productivity. So there are certain things like, so as we're talking about some of this negativity, there's some things that are out there that are really great too, that kind of keep me organized. I've become such a Google girl and, getting out there and using a lot of those for organizations. I know Microsoft Teams does a great job. There's so many aspects that are out there that are positive components for cell phones. So, kind of thinking through this, how do we keep the distance from the phone, but then when we're using it more mindfully?
I think kind of having your list of apps, your top apps, maybe not everything needs to be on like the home screen of your phone. Not everything needs to be one tap, right? So sometimes the best way to resist that temptation is to take it off that screen where you actually have to log in. So maybe really, maybe our call to anyone listening to this, watching us is, take a look at that list. Do you need them all? Maybe
right.
maybe you can curate it a little bit better so that you can access the things that you really need, and maybe break up with a couple apps that aren't really serving you anymore.
Delete.
It's okay to
It's
delete.
okay.
Press the X.
Very true, very true. So, I mean, what we're kind of really saying here, I think it's just a bit balance. I think it's this balance that kind of comes over both of our usage, finding those boundaries, using it effectively, because they're incredible tools. They really can, do wonderful things. But we also have to be mindful, as we've talked about, with the psychological component as well, and, look at that piece. So with that being said, I want to kind of turn to our studio audience a little bit and to ask some of these questions, see if you have any questions as we're talking through some of this information.
Hi, so I have a question. I really appreciate this is a really important conversation. Dr. Lipperty, you mentioned social media kind of triggering this social comparison and lower self-esteem. How might someone modify or refine their online experience to make it more positive rather than being more so draining?
That's a great question. So we can use algorithms to our advantage a little bit. The more we click on something, the more it's going to show up in our feed. So being mindful of what we click on. Is it the type of content that's going to create that negative comparison? When I say comparing up, it's the person who has what I don't have. Comparing down and looking at people that are situations that can evoke feelings of gratitude is better for our mental health. So thinking about where you click, because your feed, your algorithm will relate to that. So being mindful of what you're clicking on. When you're subscribing to something or liking something, joining something, thinking about, do I want this in my feed? And it's going to be reinforced. It's okay to unfollow things if you find that it is not benefiting you. So sometimes it's going to be, again, that idea of curating our feed and not getting notifications when there's a new post by an influencer or someone else who ultimately makes us feel badly about ourselves. And realizing that people put their best selves, their polished selves, their edited selves out there. We don't see the majority of what life looks like for people. Our best moments, our best pictures are on there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. And great question.
Hi, Dr. Caruso.
Hi.
So you mentioned phones as comfort objects. How can we feel the difference between healthy reassurance and unhealthy dependency on our devices?
Again, kind of like looking at this and saying, what does healthy mean to us? So where are we starting to see some of the dysfunction? Is it within that usage? So as I'm using it, do I feel distress? Sometimes you get to that point where you feel your anxiety ramping up. So how do I, tone that down a little bit? And what does that look like? If I'm noticing that it's more of a distressful component, well, then maybe it is time to take that break. Maybe it is time to take those kind of boundaries and really looking at it. Am I stressed because it's not in my hand? It's not nearby. Oh my God, where's my phone? That might be kind of a signal for you to say that might be unhealthy usage at that point. If I don't have it, is my anxiety, is, these the neurotransmitters kind of impacting me at this point in a negative way, and looking at it, is it disrupting my daily life? Does that take precedence over what I need to be doing? Do we ever get lost in the YouTube videos? I know, I have.
Down the rabbit hole.
Thank you. Because one leads into the next. And it's too easy to keep going and to have that component. And I suddenly look up and I go, wow, an hour just passed. How did that, I feel as if I've lost now an hour. Did I actively gain anything from it? Probably not. Right now on social media, there's the two dogs that talk to each other about their humans, and then they laugh afterwards, and I love that. I look for those, and so that's a little sad, maybe.
But not for an hour, right?
Not for an hour.
Right.
It's a quick thing, like, okay, and if that is that dopamine boost and it makes you feel good, that's the healthy connection. Yeah. And if it's that I'm in that YouTube for an hour, that's not. Now I'm starting to look at a dependency. Now I'm starting to look at it as an object that could be an addiction for me. And it is a fine line and a balance we have to be careful of. So really looking at these, pieces, I think is beneficial.
And sometimes that might require you to really take a step back. It's not in the moment. But then looking back afterward and thinking about where did time go? Like, where did I end up from where I started? I think we've all been in that position where we start a conversation in one place and it spirals, or we've been on one video and we find ourselves in a very different place. The algorithm starts feeding us other videos, other reels that really take us away. So kind of stepping back and looking at, like, was this where we wanted to go? And thinking about, did it impair our functioning?
Correct.
Like, did we miss out on everything around us? Did that anxiety lead to us not doing or doing things that we really didn't want to?
Correct. And I think that's the scary part, and that's where that balance really needs to come in. And we need to be mindful of what it is and how it's impacting us and take notice of it. I think that's one thing we do too often, is to kind of negate, like, oh, that's not such a bad thing. Let me really be in the moment and decide whether this is going to be effective for me or not. For sure.
Excellent work.
Thank you. Thank you. And great question, too. So, I guess in a sense of kind of wrapping up a little bit and starting to think about, next steps and how do we move forward now? Because, we've really identified it can be positive. And, again, there is that negative, and kind of finding that balance. Now with these components, with these tools in hand, what are you going to do? Are you going to be able to move forward? And what does that look like for you? So, I love to challenge my students. I love to take that moment in time and say, what does this look like for you? And how are you going to make it different? If this is something that is impacting you negatively, how do you make the change today? And what does that look like?
And it could begin with a small change.
Absolutely.
So again, we're not saying, phones, we are in a relationship with our phones. They connect us in many positive ways. But taking that small step, again, maybe turning off those notifications, having a meal where everybody at the table isn't on their phone. Those small changes do add up and allow you to assess along the way. So start small.
Excellent. Great advice. It really is. And it starts with you. It doesn't mean that it's, the friends and the connectivity. It's really putting yourself first. And I think we have a tendency, to let things take over, and we don't put ourselves first. This is your opportunity to gain control. This is about you. And that's what I want, always my students to take away from, is putting ourselves first. And if this is an addiction, treat it as such, learn from it, and move forward. And, kind of make that change, as you said, a small step, one step forward. Because it might not change, and you may fall back. You may say, okay, 2 o'clock in the morning, I have to check my emails. We're not watching. We're not going to know. Just to be mindful of it and to kind of take notice. I think, the world is passing us by too quickly, and the last thing that we do is really take notice and ground ourselves. So this is your opportunity, and to move forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So I don't want to, stop. If there's, any other areas you think that we need to explore, I think that we've done, pretty thorough job here.
We've left people with a charge to
Yes.
be observant, right? And to not judge where you are.
I love that.
But again, where do you want things to change for you to have a better relationship?
Exactly. So I want to, first take a moment to thank our audience that's out there online. Thank you so much for being with us today and, reviewing some of these issues. We've talked about cell phones and these various components, and we want to explore further. And so we've talked about possibly doing some more podcasts on this. We'd love to hear from you. Is there areas that you would be interested in hearing from us? So, as we put these out, either to our connection, Andrea, in the alumni office, to let her know and to communicate with her as we put this out on YouTube, to comment there. What else would you be interested in hearing about? We'd love to hear from you. I want to thank our studio audience, too. Thank you all for being here today, for taking the time to be present, and to take a moment for yourselves to learn about something new, to learn about how these things are impacting us and moving forward. And, of course, for my co-presenter, Dr. Liberini.
Always a pleasure. My next door neighbor in the office. Now we're sharing the desk here.
Yes.
And thank you to the folks at SEU, including the people on the other side of the studio here who are doing this for us. I think we talk a lot about SEU being this hidden gem.
Mm-hmm.
This podcast studio is a hidden gem at the university, and I would love to make more use of it. And I'm so glad that we have this here.
I completely agree. Yes, and thank you to our wonderful engineers that are out there, because I'm be honest, I couldn't do this without you. This is not my wheelhouse.
Right.
But again, thank you, everyone. Pleasure being with you today, and we look forward to hearing feedback and hearing from you in the future on areas that you might be considering, hearing about as well in the future. All right, thank you.
All right, we're game for another one. Hope to see you again.
Bye.